About a year ago, I bought another cheap supercar, which is not an uncommon occurrence for me, but what was uncommon is that I did not immediately talk about it on the internet. And as Doug Tabbitt has pointed out, that is something that tends to be part of my car buying experience in this season of my life, but I didn't talk about it immediately online for two very specific reasons. The first was that I thought that it might become one of the cars in a 3-car collection for a future Car Trek series, but because of scheduling and not finding other cars that really kind of aligned with it, it did not become Car Trek 12. And we are still working on some Car Trek ideas, but life has pulled us in a lot of different directions, and so there are no immediate Car Treks on the horizon. The second one is that there are times when I buy a car that actually works better for one of my friends' content models, and so there have been a lot of times where I would buy something and then sort of hand it off, and rather than me making content about the car, I'll just let them do it, and it's better for them to fully control the narrative of however that might unfold, because the car in question was a really, really interesting and a very, very cheap McLaren 570 GT, a 2017 car in cobalt purple, really, really striking, very, very fun, and again, very inexpensive, which is always the shortcut to views on the internet. And so obviously neither of those things fundamentally ended up happening, so I am right here telling the story of the car. Now, the car in question was cheap for a few reasons, the most important of which was that it was in a flood. I do love some flood cars. I had the flooded Gallardo for Car Trek 1, the flooded 599 for Car Trek 4, many, many more flood cars. I love them because if they were flooded in the past, it tends to just not just brand the title, but really brand the perception of the car, and it scares off many people that would otherwise be bidding against me, and it generally does make them really cheap. And if it's been a long time since that flood, as opposed to buying, let's just say, a yellow McLaren that has just floated down a road in Naples and is still full of salt water, generally if you're a long way away from that flood, the car is more likely to behave itself mechanically. And so the other one was the circumstance of the sale. So I got contacted, like I said, about a year ago from a guy who was a car dealer in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and he was helping an estate to liquidate some cars, some of which were salvage title supercars. So his question to me was, Ed, how do I sell a branded title supercar? And I said, well, generally you try and it doesn't go so well, and then you call me and I give you a number, you ask for a higher number, and we meet right smack dab in the middle at my original offer, and I buy the cars. And so he was aware of that program, and he ended up deciding that that was the best way for these cars to be liquidated. And so initially, I was going to be buying 3 different cars. This purple McLaren 570 GT, a very high mileage, like 106,000 mile manual V8 R8, and a BMW i8 that also had a salvage or rebuilt title. And so I knew there were going to be some other cars, and so I didn't know if it was going to stop there, but I went up there with some friends to get them picked up, and I agreed to a deal to buy those 3. Now, very shortly after, there were 6 other cars that they needed moved. It was 4 Corvettes, a C3, a C4, a C6, a C7, as well as an XLR and a Roush Mustang. And so I eventually would give one of the Corvettes to my editor who was moving on to a new job, and I sold the other ones off. I sold all the rest of the cars off to friends in different ways, and some of them wound up in more forever homes, some of them wound up on Cars and Bids, but regardless, I was simply left with the 570 GT. And I was really excited. I'd been kind of looking for a way to own another McLaren. I loved the Paris Hilton SLR. Obviously, the McLaren F1 is my favorite car of all time, and so I really wanted to see more about what the cars were like in a modern context, because when I worked at Motor Cars of Georgia, I was there from 2009 to 2015, and in 2013, we became one of kind of the second round of US McLaren dealers, and so that was right in the middle of the 12C deliveries. We had just gotten 12C Spiders, and originally there were only 7 dealers in the United States. They'd added, I guess, another 10 or so, including Atlanta, and so we got the product and learned a lot about what modern McLarens could be like in terms of their temperament and mechanical behavior, because they broke a lot. And of course, this car I was expecting to continue to break a lot, but you don't know whether you blame it on it being a McLaren or you blame it on the flood or the age or the neglect or whatever. But when I pulled up there to pick these cars up, the cars were in much better shape than I had expected, because the circumstance also had a VINwiki link that I did not know at the time. Now the cars were covered in cobwebs, but again, they seemed relatively well kept. They were on trickle chargers. Most of them started the first time. And so that was a really, really fun kind of, not really a barn find or anything like that because they weren't that neglected, but you're kind of cleaning everything off. The cars are quite dirty and we are transporting them back to Atlanta. Now what had happened with the ownership of these cars is that a high-level executive with a pharmaceutical company had retired and fallen in love with our content here at VINwiki. He loved the stories, the interviews, the tales of crazy cars, and he decided that he too should start shopping for bad history supercars. And he did a brilliant job of it, amassing a fairly large collection of really interesting things with very, very interesting backstories. And unfortunately, a couple of years later, he got cancer. And so it was relatively aggressive, fast moving, and he did pass away. And so he left all these cars with an estate that the executor and the heirs did not really know what to do with. And so they had contacted this dealer in Chattanooga. He got to me, and I ended up ultimately buying 9 cars out of the collection. There were a handful that had been discarded in other ways, and this was what was coming back with me to Atlanta. So after all the rest of the cars were sold, I ended up, accounting for however all the trades and all the other things that happened, owning this McLaren for just $26,000, which I think makes it the cheapest running and driving McLaren probably ever to sell up until this point. And it actually was running quite well with, at the moment, minimal errors as I drove it back from North Carolina. The rest of them went on trucks. And so I was immediately quite intrigued and excited to kind of have that more modern McLaren ownership experience because I hadn't spent a ton of time in the car since 2015 when I left the dealership. I'd driven most of them, but at the end of the day, you really don't know what a car is like until you spend some meaningful ownership style miles and days behind the wheel. And I was also excited because as the cars that I love, the Mercedes, the Diablo, the Bugatti, the Spiker have all gone up in value pretty meaningfully, it was nice to have something that was a bit less valuable that we could just drive. And so my wife started taking it to dinner every once in a while. My 11-year-old son really wanted to drive it a lot and became very good at it. He just had to sit on one pillow. With the movement of the seat, he could reach it. He's very good at driving. He's been driving since he's about 8 years old. I even let him put his name on the license plate. And so he probably put almost as many miles on the car as I did, mostly just driving around our neighborhood. But if you saw a purple McLaren, I hope it stayed in its lane and I was in the car with him at all times. And so sorry to all the people that may have offended. We ended up taking it on a family mountain drive. My wife drove it, so it was just a really, really fun thing to have. But unfortunately, I did not have enough room in the garage to park it inside. And so I had parked it out on some rocks near my house next to the Cayenne and other cars that there's not room for. And so it lived out there for quite some time. And as you would expect, it misbehaved a lot. Now, the primary thing that it would do was essentially forget all of the electronic components of the steering column. And so it would throw all of these different errors about the turn signals not working, the headlights not working, the paddle shifting not working, all these different things. And of course, the steering column wouldn't move anymore, wouldn't telescope or any of that. And it would just throw all these different errors, which you could usually drive around. And that's what you tend to have to do a lot of times in modern McLaren ownership, is sort of disregard these errors, which once again, I couldn't necessarily attribute to the McLaren build quality or the maintenance up to that point because it could have been the flood. That tends to be how long-term flood car issues manifest, is obscure electronic malfunctions. So as that would happen, usually a couple of key cycles would clear it, at least for some time. So I called Arnie up at Cannonball Garage, who does more pre-owned McLaren maintenance and modification than I think anybody else in the country at this point, maybe even the world. And I asked one of his technicians what he would suggest that I do. And he said the best thing to do is just to do what's a hard reset by disconnecting the battery, letting it sit for about an hour, and then hook it back up, because I'd already gone through having it locked for different amounts of time and all that. It wasn't going to be something simple. So this was sort of the next step in the diagnostic tree. So I had it out in my driveway, opened the hood, let that happen, and I just sat at the table nearby doing some work on my laptop, and I heard a door slam shut. And I thought, wow, some Amazon delivery guy must have really been in a bad mood getting out of the truck. But I kind of look over there, and there are no delivery trucks. There's nothing else in my driveway other than this purple McLaren. And I noticed that its hood is no longer up, but obviously its battery is still disconnected. And one of the things that I hate most about modern supercars is that everything is electronic. And certainly on a McLaren, everything is electronic, meaning that if the battery is disconnected, the doors will not open. Obviously, the key will not make the hood open. There is no way to get into anywhere. Now, of course, if you're in the car and it happens to run out of electricity, there are straps that you can pull to get out of the car and things of that nature. But from the outside, there is not really any good option. I learned very quickly that there was a way to use a little tiny key, which requires some pliers to manipulate it, in a keyhole under the car. But for whatever reason, that was not engaging. And so even though I was able to take the key apart, get this little key out, and slide it in there, it did not open the doors. Now, of course, an additional issue with doing that is that the glass won't have dropped down from the trim to make it easier for the doors to open. So you were still, if you had it releasing, which I could tell it wasn't, you're going to have to pull pretty hard and try not to break the glass on the doors. Now, the only other way to get the hood open is that if you had the door open, that you would pull on a cord that is sort of in the wheel well there, and it would go to the latch and get the thing open. But of course, I could not reach that. And so in talking to Arnie, he told me that I needed to jack the car up, pull the front left wheel off, take the fender liner out, and then I would be able to access that cord with the car still, without power. The problem is that this car had been very slightly lowered, and so none of my jacks could get under it. I had not expected that to be an issue, but of course that's where we were. So he told me that in theory, I could just sort of wedge something into the wheel well and pull on that same cord, but my hands are far too large. And so my son was at school, he came back, and his 11-year-old hands were just of the right size to go in there. And I was able to pull up some diagrams and some videos to say this is what you don't want to pull on, because that'll be the body harness, but this is what this cord should look and feel like. And within a few painful minutes, he was able to get in there and pull it, which of course made him feel like a proper mechanic. And we were able to get back into the car, reconnect everything, which did, as described, clear most of those errors. And so the car was, again, behaving itself. We knew never to do this without putting something in that would stop everything from shutting. But fortunately, that was the last time that it really required such intervention. Myself, my wife, my son, we all enjoyed a lot of great fun miles in the car, but ultimately it was not something that I needed long term. And again, we had not found a car trick or other use for it. And so it was time to start thinking about letting the car go. And of course, that means something inevitably bad is going to happen to it. And so that night we had a storm. Sort of right after that decision was made, it was time to start more broadly marketing the car. And a very, very large tree branch fell onto the hood of the car by way of the windshield wiper, which went into the windscreen and cracked the windshield. Now, of course, I'm not going to file just a windshield claim. The rest of the damage looked like it would buff out, but it was just one of those things where, the worst possible timing it had happened. And so a windshield for the car actually wasn't even that bad. It was a couple of grand, and there were several used versions available. But I took it over to AP3 to let them sort of help me buff out some of the parts that were done on the paint, which they did a brilliant job of. And I decided, you know what, I already had some people that were interested. I'm just going to let them address the windshield repair and things of that nature. So I ended up selling the car for about $75,000. A nice handy little profit, and it went on. And to be honest, it was that moment that really cemented to me that I always do have to get these windshield film protections. I'd had it done on the Bugatti, I had it done on the McLaren F1 when we took it on the Owners Club tour last fall, and so that has sort of become much more of my go-to repertoire of tricks and things that we need to do to prepare these cars for actual driving. And so fortunately, the guys at AP3 have always been ready with the latest XPEL products to get that installed, to get the cars protected. As much as I love some rock chips, it is better to know that if something like that happens, you're not chasing for what could have been a much more impossible to find windshield. And of course, now that the car has moved on to its new home, I do miss it. It was so nice just to have a supercar that was so approachable, so easy to use, somewhat temperamental, but that anybody could really get in and drive. And so I am looking for more like that. I think, as nice as it has been for the cars that I have owned to go up in value and become more collectible, it's also really nice for that not to be the case with the car and just to be a cheap supercar that you can drive like it's a Toyota Camry and not worry anything about, toss the keys to whoever. And of course, whenever I do that, that's when they start to break even more. But I am going to continue to endeavor to buy more cheap supercars. Nothing could be any more on brand for me, for VINwiki, and what we do around here. But I was really, really happy with my experience in the McLaren. And that packaging really as the 570, which you'd say very easily is like the most unloved McLaren. Even as the GT form, which is sort of unnecessarily softer and a little more approachable. I loved it. And so I don't know what the next one will be, but the adventure with the 570 was a really, really special and a whole lot of fun one for me and my family. Of course, now that means that I am off to AutoTempus to continue searching for all the greatest cars in the deepest, darkest corners of the internet to find the best possible deal. And that's gotten even easier because now you can just type in any text string and they will do the heavy lifting to plug that into all the different search sites and bring you the results faster and easier than you ever thought possible. We love AutoTempus because they compile all the major results from all the major listing sites into one place. And so they are responding to your feedback on all these new features, their price trends tool, all the stuff that gives you more buying power, more intelligence, and more shrewd negotiating leverage than ever before, thanks to AutoTempus. That's why we say AutoTempus.com, all the cars, one search.